This week we're talking about content repurposing. As more and more entrepreneurs work to keep up with the ever-growing list of marketing platforms that they need to produce for, having a virtual assistant who can skillfully repurpose their content is going to be more important than ever before. Now, I'm always looking for skills and services to help you stay competitive in this marketplace, and I genuinely think that content repurposing needs to be a core service that every VA offers moving forward. Content repurposing involves taking existing content and modifying it to fit into different platforms. Now, most people erroneously assume that content repurposing is simply taking an old piece of content like a LinkedIn post and then reposting it on Facebook. Taking a blog from your client's archives and slapping a new date on it and calling it a new piece of content. And unfortunately, that's so wrong. Content repurposing actually goes so much further than that. It is taking one asset and using it to create something new. This could be turning a blog post into videos or creating infographics from data-driven blogs or breaking down long-form videos into TikTok or YouTube shorts. Or it could be turning a podcast into text-based tweets. There are so many different opportunities to repurpose content that the possibilities are almost limitless nowadays. Now, to offer this service, you definitely have to have a strong love of combining systems with creativity. And you also have to have a general understanding of the different formats and the different platforms that are available nowadays. But with the right skills and with the right approach, content repurposing can be a lucrative and fun and rewarding service that you can offer as part of your business. Bonus tip, because not only can you offer this for your clients, but you can also use your repurposing skills to grow your own social media presence. Repurposing your own content is an extraordinarily fantastic way to gain new clients. And that's because rather than custom creating new things constantly, you can take one piece of core content and turn it into 20 different items that make and move traffic to your business. So let's talk about who might need content repurposing. Now, in my experience, the types of clients who benefit the most from content repurposing services are the entrepreneurs who already have a long-form content strategy built into their marketing. What I mean by that is that not everyone sees the benefit of having content or creating content or putting content out there online. And that's okay, but it is very hard to repurpose content for a client that doesn't have a lot of content. So it can be very hard to ask a client to all of a sudden go from 0 to 60 and ask them to create a ton of content that you can then play around with. But if you work with or want to work with somebody in your business who is a coach, a YouTuber, a course creator, a blogger, a podcaster, a small business owner who has a product or a service to sell and they have a digital online presence already, or even thought creators, dare I say influencers, but I'm going to use the phrase thought leader. These are people like Marie Forleo online or Gary Vee. And I bring up Gary Vaynerchuk, aka Gary Vee, by the way, very intentionally because I personally do not like Gary Vee's content. Our personalities don't mesh, but I do bring him up in the context of content repurposing because he slingshot into fame because of his expertise on content repurposing. If this is a service that you want to offer to your clients, very shortly we're going to talk about Gary Vee's very unique approach to how he breaks down content because while I might not like his personality, his approach to content repurposing is brilliant and it is simple. So if content repurposing is a service that sounds interesting to you, sounds creative to you, you like coming up with systems and workflows, then we need to talk a little bit more about a few different ways in which you can get started. Join me in the next lecture where we talk about two main approaches to building out content repurposing. Okay, so you're thinking content repurposing sounds like a service that you could potentially offer for your business. So we need to talk about a couple of different approaches because just like virtual assistants, there are many different paths to getting into content repurposing, and there are many different types of content repurposing. First, and my favorite approach, is thanks to Gary Vee. It's called pillar content. And this means that you take one piece of high quality content that can be broken down into smaller pieces for distribution across various platforms. What Gary does is he takes that one piece and he finds infinite, it feels like, number of ways to break it down. He breaks it into tweets. He breaks it into Canva graphics. He breaks it into infographics. He breaks it into audio clips of him talking about it. He breaks it into video clip. He's always giving the audience something interesting, something valuable, but he's doing it in a way that it makes sense per platform. So he's taking his chapter from his book and he's writing about it in a long form post on LinkedIn. Or he's taking key insights and creating a Twitter thread. Or he's taking one key concept and he's turning it into a pin. Or he's turning that into an Instagram photo with a caption. So there's a lot of things that he could do. And I recommend that you adopt this pillar approach with your clientele if and only if your client has a lot of great content to pull from. So I will give you an example of how I used pillar content for one of my own clients. I am the former social media manager for John Doerr's Measure What Matters. John is known as the godfather of OKRs, which is a management system framework that he introduced to Google. So John's most famous piece of content is a book that he wrote about OKRs. And lucky for me, when I started working with John, he not only gave me access to this book, but he gave me access to a handful of long form video interviews that he did about the book. So he had a handful of pretty high quality filmed interviews that he had done about this book specifically. So I already had my pillar content right then and there. Now, next I had to ask John what his goals were, and his ultimate goals were pretty simple. They were to drive traffic to his Measure What Matters website, and they were to encourage people to buy his book. He was also platform agnostic at the time, meaning he didn't care which platforms I was involved in. So ultimately, I decided to go with LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. And that's because a great majority of people who are reading the books are CEOs and entrepreneurs. And those CEOs and entrepreneurs who are reading the books are on LinkedIn. They are researching OKR how-tos on YouTube, and they are tweeting about business. Now, sometimes your clients will have opinions about what platforms they want you on, and sometimes they won't. Sometimes clients will already have a large presence on certain platforms that you may or may not be familiar with. And that's part of the joy of being a VA, is that you get to dive into these things headfirst and really learn about what makes certain content tick on those platforms. But sometimes clients won't care what you use. Sometimes they'll give you total carte blanche and be like, put my content out wherever you think it makes the most sense. It's really important at this point that you ask your client what their goals are, because their goals are going to inform what platforms you probably want them to be on. So for example, if your client wants to drive a lot of traffic to their site, like let's say, for example, you're working with a client who sells suitcases. That's a very visual product. They have a lot of photos already of their product. They probably already are involved on platforms like Pinterest, because that drives a lot of traffic, or Instagram, because that drives a lot of traffic. And so you'll probably want to continue to break down content pieces for those platforms. By the way, as a content repurposer, you might have insights that a certain platform is great for your client, but your client isn't using it. For example, I really wanted John Doerr to be on TikTok, and that was because I wanted him to start marketing himself to young up-and-coming managers. The next generation of the leaders are in the corporate world right now, and they're on TikTok. And I pitched that to him, and ultimately he was like, ooh, TikTok, hard pass. So that kind of informed my decision to get him on YouTube, because I thought he's doing these video interviews already. I need to have a way to disperse short form videos, and if he doesn't want to do it on TikTok, then I thought YouTube was my next best bet. So there always is going to be some give and take when you're talking to your clients about their goals, where they want to be, how they want to grow, etc., etc. Don't be afraid to give your opinions though if they're not on certain platforms that you think that they should be on. So there are 5 basic steps to this pillar content when it comes to content repurposing. Your first step is to choose a pillar topic with your client. This means you and your client will choose a broad topic that your client's audience is interested in. For me and John Doerr, this was OKRs. For you and maybe that suitcase example client, it's selling suitcases. Maybe that broad topic then is travel. Once you have your broad topic selected, the second thing you'll want to do is choose a piece of pillar content. Now remember, the pillar content is one large, long-form, high-quality content that you can then break into pieces. This could be a long-form blog post. Maybe your client has already written a blog post about their suitcase empire, or maybe it's an interview that they did, or maybe it's an ebook. Again, for me, my pillar content was John's books on OKRs. Number 3, I need you to break it down. Once you have the pillar content, you need to break it down into smaller pieces that can be shared across various channels on various platforms. Each piece of content should focus on a specific aspect of the topic and provide valuable insights. Now, I'm not going to lie to you guys. Step 3 is the most complicated step. It is the most time-consuming step because content repurposing does take some careful planning on your end. It means you really have to read through and understand this long-form piece of content. It's you taking the time to extract the most interesting or helpful pieces of information within that content, and then it's understanding how you want to best get those smaller pieces of content out there online. Here's realistically what step 3 looks like. Let's say, for example, your client's just done an online webinar where they've recorded a video of them talking about their suitcase. From that video, you can create a blog post. Maybe it's some of the features of their suitcase or why their product is better than others. Then take excerpts from that blog post that you wrote, and you can post short form posts on places like LinkedIn and Twitter. Then you can take quotes or stats, or you can make an infographic. By the way, you're taking these quotes and these statistics either from the video or from the blog that you've just created, and now you're just pulling those in a different format and you're making them more visual, and you're putting Canva quotes on Instagram or LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook. And step 5, you're taking that original webinar video and now you're just taking out 30 to 60 second clips. And I wanted to show you this cycle because I think it's the most visually compelling, probably visually realistic element of what step 3 looks like. Because all day I could just be like, okay, take this blog post and then break it down. And you might be like, I don't know what that looks like. So this cycle is like a rinse and repeat. Now, step 4 is learning how to optimize for each different platform. So it's no secret that a long-form video on YouTube does not perform as well on TikTok. That's because the video format is different. YouTube videos are long, horizontal. TikToks are short and vertical. So you'll want to make sure that each piece of content that you're creating from this pillar piece is optimized for the platforms that you plan to share it on. And finally, step number 5 and the last step is to track and measure what's working and what's not. You always want to measure each piece of content that you're putting out there for your client. Numbers are powerful, guys. And if you're not tracking what's performing well, what's not, what's getting the most clicks, then there's really no point in repurposing at all. Each platform, luckily for us, has their own analytics. Twitter has its own analytics page, LinkedIn has its own analytics page, YouTube, you name it, every platform has their own analytics page. So you can see exactly what types of posts people are engaging with. Maybe Canva graphics with a quote get better engagement and more clicks than just the quote that's written out itself. But you need to know exactly what's happening, because it's going to help you adapt your strategy and figure out what kind of content do you want to double down on versus what kind of content do you maybe want to not bother making anymore. And that's going to do 2 things for you. Number 1, content creation and repurposing, again, it takes a long time. So you don't want to be wasting your precious time on elements that aren't going to lead to clicks or sales for your clients. And number 2, if you are creating content that's not performing that well, your client probably doesn't want you doing that for the next 6 months because that's not going to lead to any sales for them. So those are the 5 steps of the pillar content. So that's just one strategy, by the way, pillar content. But there's also another strategy, If you have a current client, or maybe this is a service that you start offering and you land a new client that wants to hire you for content repurposing, but maybe they don't have one piece of high quality content. Like maybe you get a client who's like, here's 30 short form videos. Do what you will with these. You don't necessarily have one pillar to pull from. You have a lot of different smaller pieces. So that's where this second strategy comes from. Because in this case, the pillar content strategy is probably not going to work for you. I'm just going to call it your special sauce content strategy. This approach is about you figuring out which part of content creation really speaks to you. I think the special sauce approach is actually kind of cool because it's like you're giving yourself a niche within a niche. Here's an example. My biggest value add to content repurposing for my clients is video editing skills. I am really fast at editing videos. For example, I was able to take a 2-hour-long interview with John Doerr at Google and condense it into a 20-minute video with key takeaways pretty quickly. Then I took that 20-minute video and I was able to edit that down into various 40 to 60-second clips that I could upload as native LinkedIn or Twitter videos. But maybe your biggest value add to content repurposing is your writing. You're a really strong writer or blogger. Maybe you're able to take their video content or their smaller content and turn it into long form blog posts. And then from there, you have your own pillar content, break that up. Or maybe your strongest value add is graphic design. Maybe it's all three. Maybe you're a writer, editor, graphic design powerhouse. But whatever it is, what you want to do is really find your special sauce because that's the thing that you can focus on when it comes to content repurposing. Okay, so we have covered a lot so far. We've talked about what content repurposing is, a little bit about what that looks like, a little bit about the process. We've talked about 2 concepts in which you can do this. You can use the pillar content if you have one high quality piece of content to break up, or we've talked about your special sauce content. It really helps to have a visual aid if content repurposing is something that you are seriously going to offer for your business. And if you recall our interview with Singh last week, she mentioned looking at people's activity feeds and being disappointed when they had no assets to share. It's actually the exact same way. If you're going to market yourself as a virtual assistant who specializes in content repurposing, your own content has to reflect that. Like imagine if a client is interested in working with you and then they go to your either website or they go to your LinkedIn activity feed and it's like haphazardly slapped together. Worst case scenario, you have 0 activity whatsoever. That looks bad because how can they trust you with their content if you have no content or no proof of concept that the stuff that you're creating works? So my recommendation to you is that you use LinkedIn as your main portfolio to showcase your content repurposing skills. There are a myriad of reasons why I think LinkedIn is the best scenario for this. Number 1, your LinkedIn activity feed is a free portfolio of your work. So we talked about with that interview with Singh, the more stuff you're sharing, the more stuff you're custom creating on LinkedIn, it all goes to this activity feed. And it's easy to see what kind of things you provide, what kind of tools or services or skills are important to you, and it's all because you're sharing important and useful pieces of information. And not to mention LinkedIn is free and it holds all of this info for you. There's no charge whatsoever. You could post 4 billion gigs of information on LinkedIn and they'll never charge you for all the stuff that you're putting on their servers. LinkedIn has built-in analytics to help you get used to measuring content. I think it's really important that whatever you're posting in your activity feed, you're getting used to going to the analytics page, you're getting used to figuring out who's interacting with it, what's working, what's not, when are people most interested, what time of the day are people in and interacting on your page. So just getting used to measurement is a huge deal. Number 3, it builds up your own sphere of influence and makes you an expertise in your niche or in something. And number 4, it can lead clients directly to your business. So here's what I suggest doing to build up your portfolio. The first thing you can do is think about a local nonprofit or a charity or a friend. Maybe you have a friend or a family member that has a business. Ask them if you can do some content repurposing for them just to practice. I actually did this for a nonprofit in New Orleans a couple years ago. I'm very passionate about dogs. I love dogs. I love to volunteer with animals. So there was a local nonprofit shelter. I was volunteering with them and noticed that they had very little social media engagement, but they had a lot of content. They just weren't using it very well. So what I did very simply, it took me an hour to do at most, just to get used to this content repurposing idea. But I took some of their old photos that they had and I turned them into dating profiles on Instagram, because they have a pretty big Instagram following, but they weren't really utilizing it. So I took pictures, made Tinder profiles for them, put them on their Instagram for the day that I was, there volunteering. And then I interacted with people who were commenting on their dating profiles. So that was just my first iteration of practicing content repurposing. They saw a big spike in their engagement and I had a great time and I felt like I was doing something fulfilling. So one option that you could do is you could think of something that's near and dear to your heart, or like I said, a friend or a family member. Ask them if they have a piece of content that you can simply practice on. And if that feels icky to you, or you're like, I actually don't know anyone that I could ask, or you're like, there's no way in hell I'm asking someone or a charity if I can do this for them because I've never done it before, that's okay, I got you. In that case, I'm going to give you homework. In the next lecture, I'm going to explain a little bit more about what your homework is, but it's going to be a doozy and you have a week to do it, so don't feel like you have to spend all day doing it. Client work and paid work always comes first. But you bet your butt I'm going to give you homework, and I'm going to give you a prompt, and then I'm going to ask you to repurpose it in specific ways. So that'll be fun. The next thing you need to do if you're seriously considering this is rethink your rates. Once you have your proof of concept, we need to think about how to repackage this service, because content repurposing is absolutely considered a niche service. And with niche services come higher rates. So I like to keep rates and packages very simple, because complicated and convoluted packages have a higher likelihood of confusing clients. And if clients are confused and overwhelmed about your rates even before they talk to you, that's not a good sign. You want to just keep everything simple. A lot of virtual assistants, myself included, will charge a high hourly rate for content repurposing. I'll just give you an example. My hourly range for general virtual assistants admin work, that's travel booking, calendar, research, etc., just general admin stuff, is anywhere from $35 to $50 an hour. My content repurposing is anywhere from $50 to $100 an hour, depending on how much content the client wants. So just keep in mind that my content repurposing rate is double, if not triple, my general admin rate. What I do when I talk to clients about content repurposing is I really get into what their goals are, and I get into their expectations. You have to ask them questions like, how many posts do you want me to post on your Twitter? How many posts do you want me to post on your LinkedIn? How many videos do you want me to post on your YouTube, and with what frequency? The bigger the project, the bigger your deliverables, the higher your rate needs to be. Which is another reason why I'm giving you homework in the next lecture, because you need to actually do content repurposing and time yourself so that you have a better sense for how long it takes you to do something. In some cases, as you get better and better and better at content repurposing, the hourly rate can bite you in the butt. I don't want you to charge too low for your services. Like $20 to $30 to $40 an hour for content repurposing is too low for this type of service. And that's because the faster you get at content repurposing, and you will get faster, you basically get penalized for better, faster work if you're charging a low hourly rate. So for example, if it takes you 2 hours to break out 10 pieces of content from a blog post when you just get started, a year from now, it might take you 30 minutes. And if you're still charging $20 an hour, you just made a lot less money, even though you're faster and better at those services. So you definitely do want to charge a higher premium, because you are going to get better, you are going to get faster, and you will create systems that make you better and faster as well. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I think when you're just getting started, a high hourly rate is a pretty safe bet.